Good to see you, everyone. My name is Robbie Howell. Summer is summering, I am sweating, and I am here to bring you yet another DLC redo. This one on arguably the most, well, maybe second or third most controversial DLC that AoE2 has ever released. That being Return to Rome. Yes, indeed, I actually did my own build of the one civilization featured in this DLC, the Romans, before the DLC itself actually dropped. However, in the spirit of LAVAnilla, I am here to bring you a redesign of this original civ, as well as an overview of the DLC itself, talking about what worked, talking about what didn't. As always, image credits are in the speaker notes of this presentation. The presentation itself is linked down below. Let us begin with a quick overview of my approach as a theory crafter. My focus is on historical authenticity. I'm trying to be truer to history than the game currently is, getting the feel of a civilization without stepping on existing toes, and when I do, I will try to justify it. Obviously, I'm working within the confines of the game, and I'm trying to stick with what is actually possible to mod in, so if you see something that doesn't look possible, please let me know. And if you want to see me push the boundaries, go skip to the LAVAnte-Garde section at the end of the video. Of note, I am a hobbyist, not a historian. I have to simplify and get stuff wrong all the time. And if you want to see what sources I used, please check the speaker notes of this slide in the presentation. If you want to support me and the work I do on this channel, please leave a comment. I really want to hear what you have to say about it, whether you like the build, you hate it, have a note about the history, a balance concern, or whatever else. Please share your thoughts down below. And additionally, there's 3 other things you can do to support me. 1 is to like and subscribe, always grand. 2 is to join the Discord server, linked in the description down below. And 3 is to support me on Ko-Fi. One-time and monthly donations, all are very welcome. And as I will be sharing in a video coming out likely next week, all donations to me will be reinvested directly into this channel. So remember to check that out in the description down below, and let us move on to an official Robbie review of the Return of Rome DLC. Let's begin with the good. First of all, I don't care what anyone says, the Romans 100% deserve to be in the game. They have been in the game as an enemy since the Conquerors. They fit within the AoE2 relevant time frame, just as much as a civilization like the Huns or the Goths do. And I also love the idea of porting AoE1 to the AoE2 engine. This does open the door for them doing this more, and I think it's a great idea that has potential to be enormously beneficial to the franchise, assuming they do it better next time. But let's move on to the bad. Remember those 2 good things above? Well, everything else, I think, didn't work about this DLC. It was so badly executed that I feel like the good things got, like, tarnished and are, like, guilty by association, which is a big shame. This was a very much overpriced DLC. Like, obviously, Victors and Vanquish was much worse. Go check out this video up here if you want to hear me rant about that. But this was one civilization, a game we've already bought, twice, if you're like me and bought the original on disc back in the day, and a couple campaigns for 15 bucks, and none of the campaigns for AoE2? No, that is absolutely unacceptable. Additionally, the AoE1 port, in my opinion at least, sucks ass. And this is evidenced by the fact that no one is talking about it anymore. I will say the quality of life improvements make it playable. Original AoE1 is a clunky piece of shit, though, again, I love the era, and it was an innovative game for its time. But the balance changes don't really fix what I see to be the fundamental issues with the game that prevent people from wanting to revisit it very much. So my official grade for this DLC, for what it's worth, is a D. The good is pretty dramatically outweighed by the bad, but there is still light at the end of the tunnel. Now, I have a couple of amendments that I think would have made this DLC better. I'd love to hear what you guys think about them. For one, more AoE2 content. We should have gotten at least 2 more civs. I think something like the Vandals and the Lombards to contrast the Romans would have been really cool, but you could have come up with other ones as well. At least 1 new Age of Empires 2 campaign, preferably Roman, of course. And also, we would want to see adds and changes to AoE1. Yes, they did some balance changes that made the game like more streamlined and more like AoE2. And because of that, we should have seen unique units and technologies for all civilizations, bare minimum. That is just unacceptable that they didn't do that, in my opinion. And preferably with more civilizations added to the game as well, beyond just the LAVAnte, which is, you know, cool out, no shame with that one. Lastly, this is less mandatory than the other 2, but I would have wanted to see some sort of crossplay. The ability to play Age of Empires 1 versus Age of Empires 2, or at least make custom scenarios that have both, like, assets and elements of both games combined. Would it have been messy and unbalanced? Yes. Who cares? It doesn't have to be competitive. Just let people do it. I'm sure that you can bash something together in the scenario editor or the Genie if you have enough time and experience. I think that even just giving people the ability to random map between the two would have been sick. Even if it's completely unbalanced, who cares? It doesn't have to be balanced. It would have been fun. If they had added all of these proposed amendments, I would have happily paid more than $15 for this DLC. I think like 20, 25 would have been pushing it, but 20 for sure would have been fair. And so, with all that said, let's move on from my official review of the DLC to my official review of the Civilization debut unit, the one lonely, sad little civilization. Let's begin with the good for the official Romans. I think the focus on the sword line is great. Very solid. I like how they approach it. I think the design of the Legionary is quite good. I actually prefer it to my own design for the Legionary. I think the Scorpion focus is, is cool. The Scorpion is a very, underwhelming unit in my opinion, and I think that this is a reasonably appropriate civilization to look at it further on. The cavalry I think was done pretty well. I don't like the unique technology applying to cavalry, but besides that, I think the way that they didn't understate the cavalry, which is very tempting to do because people always think, oh, Rome had no cavalry. No, that's not true at all. They had cavalry during the Republic days, even if it wasn't a big focus, and later on during the later Empire, they had plenty of cavalry. It wasn't the core of the army, but it was reasonably prominent. And so they didn't understate that, which is good. And beyond everything else, I'm just happy the Romans are in the game. So that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Now, let's talk about the bad. First of all, I really don't like the villager bonus. I think it's lazy. I think it's very inappropriate for the civilization. Why are the Romans, of all people, having super villagers that are slightly good at everything? That's not what the late Empire was like. They were in serious trouble. I also don't think that the Centurion is a good unique unit, both because it's quite anachronistic, and also because, again, it feels quite lazy. And I think both of the unique technologies have various problems. Ballistas for reasonably obvious reasons, and Comitatensis because I think it's a bit too much of a push in that direction. Plus, like I said, I don't love it applying to cavalry. The Navy is very much overemphasized. The late Roman Navy was nothing special. It's quite overrated. Yes, they had a lot of ships because they were the de facto rulers of the Mediterranean, but they got trounced regularly. So having the Navy get all these bonuses, I don't think makes sense. And I feel like the archers, siege, and defenses all are a little too weak. Not terrible, but a little bit. So my overall grade for this Civ is a B-. I do not think it's that bad. I think that the worst parts about it kind of stick out like a sore thumb, but there's a lot of good to be said about this civilization, and if it weren't for the fact that it was so poorly balanced from what I've seen from release, I think it would be liked a lot more than it is now. Plus the taint of the DLC still in people's mouths. So, like I said, I did my own build for this civilization before the DLC actually came out, before we even knew it was coming out, and it was I think my 6th ever build, 7th ever build. And I think it was one of my better early ones. I predicted a good number of things in the official build, a few of them uncannily accurately. If you want to see me compare and contrast the two at the time, go take a look up here. It did have a lot of weird elements, of course, especially the gold costing trash units, but I think overall it was one of my more grounded ones. And it wouldn't have been possible without my awesome collaborator, Lorenzo M. He was the first guy who ever collabed with me, the first viewer who ever collabed with me on the channel. And I'm very, very grateful to all he contributed to that design. Couldn't have done it without you, man. And salutes to you. I would give this build a B. I think especially considering how early I was to the scene and that it was my first collab, this one came together quite nicely, and I'm reasonably proud of it to this day. Now, let's take an overview of the new take on the Romans civilization. The Romans, an infantry civilization. First bonus. Receive 100 or 150 food and gold upon reaching feudal or castle age. Now, this is one of the more extrapolated bonuses, and it took me a long time to come up with how I wanted to represent this. Rome, even the late Empire, continued to be immensely wealthy and had enormous agricultural gains. I didn't want to just give them a gathering bonus, nor did I want to place the focus on their villagers, because it was less a matter of their people were doing really well, and more the empire was too big to fail until it failed. And so I felt like a good way of representing that would be to give them this big lump sum of resources upon aging up that cuts off before Imperial Age to show kind of a downturn at the very end. Yes, this is somewhat stealing the Ethiopian's bonus. I'll get to a little bit later why I don't think that is a problem, but let's move on to the next bonus. Blacksmith and blacksmith infantry technologies are available 1 age earlier. Obviously, the official build does something somewhat similar, and I'm sure it's referencing something similar as well. The Romans had an enormous military advantage in their gear and discipline over their enemies, even as they were losing against those enemies. They had a huge leg up on the rest of antiquity, and I felt like this is a very good way of representing it. Would it ever be built in Dark Age because it's so expensive? I don't know. If so, we could discount the blacksmith or something like that, maybe. I'm not entirely sure, but overall, I like the idea behind this one enough that I would fight for it. Third bonus, it's the same as the official. Scorpions cost minus 60% gold and benefit from ballistics. Obviously, torsion-powered bolt throwers were quite common even in late Rome, from everything I could see, though they did evolve and look rather different from the Republican days. Of note, this is a bonus that I almost precisely predicted on my own build with Lorenzo, though I had the discount apply to both wood and gold. And lastly, team bonus. You start with a free watchtower built into your town center. If you see the diagram on screen right now, but it's like a part of the TC's body, right? And this is meant to represent the substantial fortification of the empire, especially along the borderlands, which feels appropriate as a team bonus. And so in summary, you got a bit of a grab bag of bonuses that are going to really help you with especially early to mid game power spikes. But let's dive from here into the unique units, beginning with their castle unique unit, the Vexillarius. This is an infantryman trained at the castle for 40 food and 80 gold. Quite expensive for an infantryman. It is a very beefy aura unit that has a notably weak attack. So its stats, to give you a brief summary, it has a shit ton of HP and defenses for an infantryman, but other than that is quite underwhelming with a notably weak attack. It does, however, have an ability very akin to the current Centurion of granting attack and movement speed, though less than the current Centurion gives, but it gives it to all your units within 9 tiles. So it's not just selective to the sword line. It does not benefit the unit itself, it does not benefit allies, and it does not stack. The unit then upgrades to the Elite Vexillarius in Imperial Age for 600 wood and 800 gold. It gets a bit more HP, line of sight, plus 1 attack, and plus 5% attack speed from its aura, as well as 2 more tiles to its aura's radius. The Vexillarius, in summary, serves a similar role to the current Centurion, meaning that getting 1 or 2 of them in all of your forces are going to massively help with their combat efficiency and with their mobility. Not nearly as impactful or terrifying a unit as the current Centurion, but hopefully still a backbone of the Romans' comp. Unique unit number 2, the Comitatensis. This is an infantryman replacing the 200 swordsman upgrade in Imperial Age, instead costing 400 food and 200 gold. Sound familiar? It's a midpoint between a 200 swordsman and a champion, beefier, specialized against infantry. To give a summary of the stats, you can think of it as being honestly quite similar to the current legionary unit, but my version has minus 50% upgrade cost and upgrade time, but also has a little bit less HP and a little bit less bonus damage. Now, I really like the current Legionary. It's actually, I think, my favorite part of the official Romans build, and was extremely close to my original design. The reason I have called this unit the Comitatensis is because by the time of the late Empire, it seems that the sort of like heavy elite infantry that we associate as being called legionaries were more specifically called Comitatenses, hence where the current Romans' unique technology comes from, but I think it better applies to the unit itself. In terms of why I made the mild adjustments I did, I wanted this unit to be a lot more accessible than it currently is, because it currently has a really exorbitant upgrade cost, and that's because these units were very prevalent. They were a direct evolution from the Legionary, and it makes sense that the Romans would be able to get to them easier than other civilizations would be able to get to Champion. I also wanted it to have slightly worse stats than a Champion, though it wins head-to-head thanks to the infantry bonus, as a way of showing that the Roman infantry at this point was not invincible. So that's the Comitatensis in summary. Let's briefly now talk about the unique technologies. First, Plumbata in Castle Age. This gives the militia line a ranged charge attack, identical to a normal attack, but deals pierce damage and thrown as a javelin with 7 range. So you know they have the charge bar. When it's full, if you target an enemy, fling, they throw their javelin, and then over the 15-second recharge, they go in and start chopping up as usual. This technology would cost 300 wood and 150 gold. It would not be affected by archer upgrades, but would be affected by ballistics. The plumbata were smaller and lighter than earlier pila, or pilum singular, and were like big throwing darts, right? You could carry a lot more of them than you could carry the much heavier and longer pila, and were used mostly for skirmishing and deterrence. They had less kill power than a pilum did, but were more versatile overall. Of note, I imagine this is going to be the single least likely thing on this build to actually be implementable, so if you want to see some alternate ideas for this particular technology, take a look down in the pinned comment where I think I should have a couple of good ones. Moving on to the Imperial Age unique technology, Federati. This unlocks the Huskarl, Throwing Axeman, and Tarkin for you to build, and spawns 2 of each at up to 5 of your town centers. So it's like First Crusade plus Anarchy plus Marauders plus more. Now, the Huskarl and Throwing Axeman would be available at your barracks, the Tarkin at your stable, but you do not get elite upgrades for any of them. You are stuck with the base level, so it's a versatile technology that gives you a big batch spawn of dudes like First Crusade, but then it peters out, and you can't get more oomph out of it. This costs 500 food and 400 gold, so more expensive than First Crusade, and is of course in reference to the Federati barbarian forces that later Western Rome began to rely increasingly on for military support. This is one of the many elements that would lead to their collapse. And of note, I was very tempted to remove the trainability component and have the tech be re-researchable, so you get like consistent batches of non-elite units. But this seemed too extreme for a LAVAnilla build. Just know that in a LAVAnte-Garde style build, this is absolutely one of the changes I would have made. Also, if a new like barbarian unique unit showed up, especially like an archer of some kind that was appropriate for the Romans, I would happily switch the Throwing Axeman for that unit, since that one feels kind of like the odd man out of the group that you get off this technology. Again, if you think any of these effects is infeasible, check out the pinned comment below for possible compromises that I or others have suggested. Now, from the unique technologies, let's move on to some tech tree differences. I won't do a full breakdown, but I want to give you guys a quick comparison of what this build's technology tree would look like as compared to my original build and the official one. So, in contrast from my original build, this build would get Squires, Siege Ram, Heavy Demo Ship, Dromon, and Faith, and lose a whole bunch, including but not limited to Arbalister, Camel, the Catapult Galley unit I came up with, as well as Halberdier, quite notably. And from the official build, you would get Siege Onager, Hoardings, a couple of Monk technologies, Bracer, that's a big one, Plate Mail Armor, Treadmill Crane, but lose Husbandry, Atonement, Guilds, Halberdier. So in summary, these are mostly kind of like minor technical changes, but overall, Archer's defenses in Siege are a bit better than the official. There are small knocks to the Cavalry and the Economy, and you don't get any more Halberdier, because I wanted to keep the late game on the weaker side. With the tech tree now blazed through, let's talk about some of the themes that I had in mind when I did my original Romans build and how I'm applying there here. The first of the major overarching themes that I derived from their history being one step ahead up until the end. You can see examples of this in my Blacksmith bonus, the resources on Advanced bonus, the Comitatensis, and Federati. Now, I was trying to make it so that this build would spike well before other civilizations, but end up being kind of equal or inferior to them in late post-Imperial Age, kind of matching their historical trajectory. Another theme was their general decline. You can see this in their team bonus, the cutoff for the advancing bonus, Federati again, and also their tech tree. They are good at both attacking and defending early, but if you don't capitalize, you will hit a substantial fall in post-Imperial Age, with Federati being like a swan song, like a big final boost, but even that will eventually fall off because you don't get the elite upgrades. So if the opponent can weather the sudden swarm of Huskarls and Tarkins, you may just be in trouble. And the last thing I was trying to capitalize on was their sophisticated military machine, in things like the Smith bonus, the Scorpion bonus, the unique units, Plumbata, and Federati. The Roman army largely remained very well trained and disciplined right up to the end, even though like they were failed by their superiors and supply chains and bad luck. But they had a great variety of troops and armaments, and I was trying to capture that in this build with some of the very unique and flavorful characteristics of the Roman army at this time. To briefly touch upon their campaign, they absolutely should have one, and I think that Aetius would be the best choice, so you could play out the other side of Attila. You also wouldn't only be facing the Huns. Aetius fought many barbarian wars before then, so you'd have awesome civ variety. But if you didn't want to go with Aetius, I think Stilicho and Majorian would also be very solid options. With that now covered, Let me talk about a couple of uncertainties I have still with this build. First one being, do the timings work out? So obviously I wanted this to be a very timing-based design, hitting power spikes right up until mid-Imperial Age and then falling off. And it's always kind of a crapshoot whether these sort of timing-based designs actually work out and whether they would actually fall into place. Maybe they're even too good post-Imperial Age. Oh, whoops, I wrote this before I removed help. Well, I did remove help, so you know where I went with that idea at least. Another uncertainty I have is their potential incoherency. A lot of their bonuses might come off as seeming kind of random and non-cohesive. I do think they're well-grounded, and I did want to avoid making the Civ too streamlined and just like stacking a shit ton of bonuses in like one unit line like the sword line. As much as I like how the official build handles the sword line, I think that it might be focused a little too much. Also, for another uncertainty, the food gold bonus. This is, I think, the biggest stretch on the build in terms of the historical grounding. I was really trying to find a way of representing the Empire's wealth and agricultural potency, but also at the same time how it still fell into decline. And I wanted to do all that without getting super fancy and doing a LAVAnte-Garde thing, because I'm sure you know I was tempted to do that. So I wasn't thrilled with how it came out, but I think it's fairly appropriate, and it is of course semi-stolen from the Ethiopians. It's different from them, but similar enough that I wouldn't want both to exist in the game. It seems very random for them, and at least I have some justification for it here, you know what I mean? But I would be happy to change this bonus if a better one was come up with, or if some research about the Ethiopians showed that it was a perfect fit for them. If you want to check out a couple of FAQs that I anticipated hearing from you guys, then take a look on screen right now. If not, let's move on to the LAVAnte-Garde section. What I would do if I was able to do anything I wanted. Impossible, improbable, and often idiotic, but innovative ideas. So for some potential adds to the civilization, there are a bunch of unique / semi-regional units like the Limitaneos, which are like the border guards, a rank below the Comitatenses. This would be like a pikeman replacement that maybe could be shared with the Byzantines to kind of mirror the Comitatenses. The Scholarian would be like a very tanky, heavy cavalry, maybe replacing the Cavalier if we want to be cute and have a triad to match the Comitatenses and the Limitaneos, also maybe shared with the Byzantines. If you want to see some of the other additions I had in mind, or some of the tabled bonuses that I was strongly considering, take a look on screen right now, but there's two I really wanted to focus on. One being specific federati tribes instead of a single bundled tech where like you research the technology and it opens like a submenu of different specific tribes that you could script as federati, with that defining what unique unit you got and maybe some other bonus, but also a unique downside that kicks in over time. Oh, that would be so cool. And the other one would be a regional unit, a staff slinger. The staff sling is quite a common unit across all of medieval history and before, and I could see this being one that was shared across many civilizations, not just like Roman and adjacent. I would envision it as being like a siege archer almost, throwing like a fire pot or some sort of early incendiary or explosive that would be pretty weak, have like kind of a lame area of effect attack, but have notable bonuses against buildings and ships. But with that, we come to the end of this LAVAnilla Romans redesign. Thank you all so much for watching. Before we finish up, let's take a look at the rework Likeliometer. In my opinion, how likely is it that the official Romans will receive any kind of rework, maybe even one that got a little closer to what I'm proposing here? And on the rework Likeliometer, we have a 2 out of 10. I don't give it a 1, even though it's a very new civilization. It is rather a controversial one. But overall, like I said, I don't think the current Romans are that egregious. There are many worse civilizations in the game, even if I do think it's a good idea to balance change them, because it's so infuriating having one of the best civilizations in the game be gated behind a paywall. But that's just what I think. Now I want to hear what you think. How'd you like the build? What do you think about the LAVAnilla format if this is your first time tuning into it, having seen some of my old designs? And what do you want to see me tackle next? I got a lot of plans for this channel going forwards, and I look forward to having you along for the ride. But until then, my name is Robbie Howell. I am very, very sweaty. And ciao for now.